readers by eyes and by ears, this is Mighty Chen and welcome back to my YouTube channel. Okay, so today is going to be a short one. I already said before that this was going to be a very busy week for me, and I'm literally reading this morning before I get started working. So this video is going to be short. And this week is just gonna kind of be out of whack. You might not get much content, but I will at least give you what I feel like I have the energy to give. And right now, that is the energy for one chapter, maybe a second one, but I'm exhausted actually, so it just may be one chapter. But yeah, we'll just see how the rest of this week goes. But I always say, in my opinion, something is better than nothing, even though I'm not obligated, But yeah, let's just get started, shall we? Chapter 54. What kind of person would tell someone they're contaminated the minute they saw them? Gao Yi frowned, but fear quickly got the better of him. Why would you say so? In a fortunate coincidence, I've learned the art of mysticism from a young age, said Suipichu. I can read auras and physiognomy. The moment I entered, I saw a black aura curling around your forehead. I fear you may have encountered some dark influence yesterday. Suipichu was being far too familiar, but after the scare Gao Yi had gotten last night, he both desperately needed someone to confide in and lacked the presence of mind to be suspicious. He hemmed and hawed, but ultimately couldn't resist asking, Did you, too, encounter something strange last night? I did, Suipichu nodded. To tell the truth, it's for this very reason that we came to the magistrate so early this morning. Tell me, quickly. Suipichu sketched a rough summary of the ghostly wailing they'd heard the night before. Interestingly, his story made no mention of Feng Xiao's thunderous shouting, nor the basin of water he'd used to wash his feet. Color drained from Gao Yi's face. Could you make out what the ghost was saying? It was crying about a horrific death, some kind of injustice. Did the magistrate hear it last night as well? The ghost's wailing? Now that he knew he wasn't alone, many of Gao Yi's doubts evaporated into relief. Although he was still unlucky, he was at least fortunate to have another witness backing him up. He lowered his voice and said cryptically, I didn't just hear it, I saw it. Suipichu and Feng Xiao glanced at each other in surprise. What did it look like? Was it really the ghost of a woman? I didn't have a clear view. It was dressed in white, hair unbound and scattered, very thin and tall. I couldn't say if the voice was male or female. It appeared right next to my bed, but the instant I called for someone, it disappeared. Every time I lay down, its voice would ring in my ears, sounding both close and distant, crying about its death and begging me for vengeance. Feng Xiao grabbed Suipichu's sleeve, eyes wide with alarm. Husband, it didn't spare even the magistrate. Oh, perhaps we'll encounter the ghost again tonight. Husband, should we change inns? Now it makes sense, Suipichu said, solemn. I performed a divination before we left, and the reading was calamitous. Oh, God. It seems it was not merely an ill omen, but a harbinger of the 1,000 weeping ghosts. Just the words made Gao Yi's skin crawl. What are the 1,000 weeping ghosts? If a great injustice occurred 20 years or so ago, when there were no court officials in the city for the victims to appeal to, the resentment will have accumulated with the passage of years. The energy is concentrated around Duan Qihu. I could sense it. This is all because he went to the Xing family's banquet. We were contaminated by the heavy resentment around Duan Qihu. That's why it's become so easy to see negative forces like your aura, Lord Magistrate. In Gao Yi's opinion, this vengeful ghost was too considerate. Each debt has its debtor. If it wants revenge, it should seek out its nemesis. What's the point of disturbing our rest? It's simply not reasonable. Feng Xiao assumed his role as the straight man. Husband, if you're right, does that mean things will get worse? Undoubtedly, said Suibichu. Each day the case is ignored is another day the resentment will deepen. Look at last night. It didn't merely appear at the magistrate's mansion. Even the inn we were staying at encountered the ghost. The luck of others in the city is bound to be affected if this continues. Once it happens, the 1,000 weeping ghosts will descend. One of Cuibichu's points concerned Gao Yi greatly. What happens if one's luck is affected? In mild cases, misfortune will follow you everywhere. In severe ones, you'll be plagued by evil spirits and become confused and disoriented. For merchants, their business will flounder. For officials, their career will suffer setbacks. Feng Xiao gasped. Husband, won't we be struck by bad luck as well? We're merely passers-by. Whom have we provoked? Hurry, let us leave the city while we can. This isn't our home. We must leave them to suffer their own bad luck. Gao Yi stared as Feng Xiao continued. Husband, I'm so frightened. If this carries on, will there be a night I wake up and see a ghost sleeping beside me instead of your dear self? Cui Bichu shot him a furtive glare. Enough. Don't overdo it. Any more is overkill. Look how scared he is, said Feng Xiao's answering look. So I've embellished a little. This way, he'll be too spooked to sleep tonight. Gao Yi didn't notice their silent conversation. He was scared witless. Though he remained outwardly wary, in his heart he was largely convinced. Someone like Duan Qihu, who'd pulled himself up by his bootstraps, might not have been so gullible. But Gao Yi had always believed in divination and the idea of good and ill omens. Half the city knew this incompetent magistrate would cower in his house the entire day if his coins showed bad fortune. This time, he'd seen a ghost with his own 2 eyes and hadn't gotten a wink of sleep because of it. Now that he'd been frightened again by Feng Xiao and Cui Bichu, his nerves were shot. Judging they'd applied enough heat, Cui Bichu asked, Has the magistrate considered investigating the case so the victim may rest in peace? The best course is to resolve the matter once and for all. Gao Yi smiled bitterly. You speak as if it's easy. Where would I start? And whom would I investigate? Surely you don't suggest I knock on Duan Qihu's door and ask him if he's ever killed anyone. The case is 20 years old at least. I've only been in Qianmo a few years. I don't even have a file on the case, let alone a corpse. The haunting seemed to have started at the inn's dry well. We might find something if we send someone down to search it. There are skilled coroners capable of extracting clues from bare bones. Lord Magistrate, this matter affects not only the luck of the city, but your own personal fortunes. You don't want to remain a county magistrate here for the rest of your life, do you? What do you mean? Gao Yi furrowed his brow. Take this opportunity to investigate Duan Qihu. Then you can strike a blow against Xing Mao and eliminate both major factions of Qianmo in one fell swoop. Cui Bichu explained. You can free yourself from being a puppet magistrate while recording a great achievement. You might even be promoted. An achievement of this magnitude could raise you to a marquis. Gao Yi shook his head. He'd been here for several years, long enough to understand how deeply Duan Qihu and Xing Mao's factions were rooted. Unless the court sent an army to crush them, he'd never eliminate either of these men's influence. At yesterday's banquet, Xing Mao's subordinates were exposed trying to poison Duan Qihu. Xing Mao denied his involvement in the firmest terms, but do you think Duan Qihu believes him? Xing Mao certainly knows he doesn't. To protect himself, he'll make the first move to consolidate his power. Magistrate Gao, how do you know you won't be his next target? Stop talking. I can't do it. Gao Yi fell silent as realization struck. When he spoke next, his face was dark with suspicion. You're not the nephew of the king of Kucha. Who are you? Kucha had never involved itself in Qianmo's affairs. Why would the king's nephew encourage Gao Yi to overthrow Xing Mao and Duan Qihu? It's true. I am not from Kucha, Cui Bichu said coldly. Gao Yi, your death is nigh. You still think you can stand to the side? He took out a small, lacquered wood seal and threw it down before Gao Yi. Look at this. Gao Yi picked it up doubtfully. When he saw what it was, he started. Officials who held multiple positions commonly commissioned 2 or even 3-sided seals for ease of use. The seal Cui Bichu had tossed before Gao Yi had more than 6 sides. This seal was the genuine article. Cui Bichu didn't like to expose his position in the Zuoya Bureau, but like Feng Xiao, he held a fair number of other titles. Altogether, it made an intimidating impression. 2 of the seal's sides were engraved with Glorious Grandmaster and Imperial Censor. The former had no true authority. It was essentially an honorary title, but it was one the emperor granted to officials with great achievements. The latter title of Imperial Censor had been established only the previous year. Its rank wasn't high, so not many were familiar with it. But Gao Yi had heard from his friends in the capital that the role of this position was to impeach corrupt and tyrannical officials, as well as manage ceremonial affairs for the 3 departments and 6 ministries. Its power and authority were unprecedented. Though an imperial censor had to bow before many officials, the authority he wielded was enough to frighten anyone. The title of Glorious Grandmaster was of the 3rd rank, while the imperial censor was merely of the 8th. But an official's highest ranking title was what mattered. When Gao Yi met Cui Bichu, he should be the one to bow. But something was still off. This was a small border town. What privileged minister of the court would come here and subject themselves to the sand? Why would a 3rd-rank official pop up in the middle of the desert? I'm investigating an important case and stopped here along the way. To remain discreet, I traveled under the guise of the king of Kuchao's nephew. Gao Yi, after seeing this seal, do you still want to question me? Cui Bichu had already deceived Gao Yi once. Naturally, the magistrate was still on his guard. Dare I ask your excellency what case you are investigating? What does it have to do with me? His message was clear. Even if Cui Bichu was an imperial censor, he couldn't order Gao Yi around. Cui Bichu looked at him coolly. The imperial court had ordered me to Suyab in the western Khaganate. Do you understand now? Gao Yi was not ignorant of the court's many disagreements with the Gokturks over the past 2 years. Any mission related to the Gokturks must be one of great importance. He felt a chill run through him as comprehension dawned. Feng Xiao gave the table before him a tap, startling Gao Yi from his thoughts. He didn't use much force. Gao Yi didn't hear a sound. But the entire table crumbled to sawdust, drifting to the ground and heaping upon the cattail mat. Magistrate Gao, said Feng Xiao gently, what do you think of my martial arts? Gao Yi swallowed hard and squeaked out, Exceptional! Feng Xiao smiled. Who could possibly order a martial artist of my caliber around? Is there anywhere I can't go? Perhaps you think we're petty con men. Wouldn't such a thing be unworthy of my talents? If Cui Longjuan isn't who he claims, would I be at his beck and call? Cui Bichu's official seal had gone a long way toward convincing Gao Yi. Under Feng Xiao's intimidation, he cast away the last of his doubts. Gao Yi stood and cupped his hands. How should I address you, sir? Cui, written with the character Shan and Jue, Cui Bichu. Cui Longjuan, said Gao Yi, you are a high-ranking official charged with heavy responsibilities. Perhaps it's not my place to ask, but your mission seems to have little to do with Duan Xihu's case. My business indeed has nothing to do with Qiemo, but I don't wish to come back on my return mission to find our court-appointed magistrate is dead and Qiemo has become the new kingdom of Shanshan. Gao Yi chuckled dryly, waving the remark off. Don't say something so frightening. Fool, do you know the Xing residence conceals more than 5,000 sets of armor? And that's aside from their estate. They have 2 granaries and treasures hidden elsewhere in the city. These combined are more than enough to seize Qiemo. Cui Bichu had wanted to slam his palms on the table to intimidate him further, But alas, it had been smashed to dust by Feng Xiao moments ago. He raised his voice instead, silently cursing Feng Xiao. Gao Yi was skeptical. How can you be sure? The court has been establishing secret bases of operations within Qianmo to gather intelligence for years, Sui Buchu said coldly. Though we've yet to pinpoint the location of the two granaries, we've confirmed the existence of the armor. Yet, even now, you deceive yourself into thinking Xing Mao won't mobilize troops. Or do you fancy that if he does, he'll let you go? If Xing Mao didn't wish to enter open hostilities with the Sui dynasty, he could simply bundle Gao Yi up and send him out of the city. Gao Yi might retain his life, but it'd be impossible for him to remain an official. The court would most likely indict him. Losing one's nation's territory was a grave crime. Gao Yi blanched. He thought back to the fierce confrontation between Duan Qihu and Xing Mao at yesterday's banquet and the surging undercurrents beneath. He thought of the ill readings his divinations had yielded over the past few days. He even thought of his ghost sighting the previous night, as well as the 1,000 weeping ghosts Cui Buchu had mentioned a moment ago. His thoughts tangled into a mess, and he was unable to make up his mind. Cui Buchu had long known Gao Yi was a useless and talentless man. Any other day, he'd have pushed this man aside and simply rolled up his sleeves to do the job himself. But right then, their reinforcements had yet to arrive. The few people they had weren't enough. Ineffectual as he was, Gao Yi was a high-ranking official of the court, and behind him stood law and due process. His authority would make their task easier, as long as Gao Yi could be induced to cooperate. But even if Xing Mao is hiding armor, it doesn't necessarily mean he's thinking of rising up, right? His ancestors were the kings of Shanshan. That armor is his inheritance. Besides, these borderlands are always in turmoil. We're also close to the Khaganate here. He might just want to protect himself. Gao Yi had begun to come up with all kinds of excuses for Xing Mao. I've heard, replied Cui Buchu, that after the third round of drinks at Xing Mao's banquets, there's often a performance of the Song of the Great Wind by Emperor Gao Zu of Han. The great wind rises, oh, the clouds are driven away. I return to my native land, oh, now the world is beneath my sway. That song has spread everywhere and is sung among the people, Gao Yi replied feebly. Xing Mao is familiar with Han culture. He's practically a Han himself. I'm sure he doesn't mean anything by it. Cui Buchu sneered. I've heard another story. The year Magistrate Gao arrived and took office, Xing Mao and Duan Qihu each sent you a messenger, one bearing a white fish and the other a precious blade. The metaphor of a white dragon in fish's clothes, used to describe nobility disguised as commoners, was a well-known one. Tracing back to Liu Xiang's Garden of Stories from the Han Dynasty, which depicted Wu Zishu's admonition to the king of Wu during the spring and autumn period. Xing Mao's message was plain. Meanwhile, the precious blade was Duan Qihu's threat, warning him that he shouldn't dream of meddling here. The mightiest dragons couldn't defeat a snake in its own territory. Even if he were a Sui official, Duan Qihu would have no problem slitting his throat. Gao Yi was well versed in the classics. He'd understood at once what these objects implied. As for Duan Qihu's threat, it was arrogant, but there was no real need to be afraid. The man hadn't been proclaiming his ambitions to Gao Yi, only testing his reaction. But Gao Yi was a coward. He'd reported Xing Mao's ambitions in a memorial, and that was the extent of it. The court had no energy to spare for the city, and thus he had comfortably whiled away his life in Qianmo. He'd never considered contending with Duan Qihu and Xing Mao to try and take back the city. Xing Mao, on the other hand, learned much about Gao Yi's character from this incident. He grew ever more unrestrained and didn't take Gao Yi seriously at all. If there was a ranking for the biggest slackers in the world, Gao Yi's name would undoubtedly appear. He might even make the top 3. He was only lucky he wasn't Cui Buchu's subordinate. The Lord Chief would have had Qiao Xian toss him into a river as fish food long ago. Gao Yi hadn't expected Cui Buchu to know these details. Embarrassed, he smiled bitterly and pleaded his case. Cui Langjun is wise. It's not that I don't wish to help. Your lordship has been here for just a few days, but you must have seen it yourself. Xing Mao is powerful. Duan Qihu is imperious. Rather than putting ourselves in the middle, we should wait for them to clash, then reap the benefits. The idea in itself wasn't unreasonable, but Xing Mao and Duan Qihu were no fools. Would they really sit on their hands while Gao Yi profited from their conflict? On top of being as timid as a mouse, Gao Yi was often stubborn and inflexible. Cui Buchu had no interest in continuing to convince him. It's fine if you don't want to get involved, he said, rising. I'll take charge, but it must be in your name. Gao Yi opened his mouth to refuse and met Cui Buchu's frigid gaze. The words froze on his lips. Feng Xiao was unruffled. Gao Yi, if you're to drink, drink of the victory wine, not the poison cup. If we wish to harm you, we need only to say the word. But we're all officials of the same court. We must have somewhat of an alliance, mustn't we? If nothing changes, you'll be haunted by vengeful ghosts day in and day out. Long before Xing Mao kills you, you'll exhaust your vital yang energy and perish. For Gao Yi, being haunted by ghosts was a more terrifying prospect than getting offed by Xing Mao. He began to waver. Eventually, he said, I'm feeling unwell at the moment, so I'll be closing my door to guests. Cui Langjun's plans are his own. In other words, he would give tacit approval to Cui Buchu's actions. After they left the county office, Feng Xiao turned to Cui Buchu. How did you know a ghost would get him to compromise? When I was preparing to head to Liugong City 2 months ago, I had someone pull every file pertaining to the route between Liugong City and the Western Cognate. That included one on the cowardly Qianmo County magistrate who still believes in divination. Feng Xiao gave Cui Buchu an appraising look. 2 months ago, Cui Buchu had already investigated everything he thought he might need and memorized Gao Yi's proclivities and weaknesses. And as soon as he set foot in Qianmo, he'd begun to think of ways to provoke Duan Qihu and Xing Mao. Your admiration is flattering but unnecessary. I simply thought several steps ahead of you. Cui Buchu's tone was light, his smile reserved. Feng Xiao shook his head. No, I was just thinking it's little wonder you're shorter than me and in such poor health. You spend all your energy plotting against others. The corner of Cui Buchu's mouth quirked up. It's true I'm in poor health. Maybe I can't bounce around aimlessly all day like you do. But are you positive you're taller than me? Aren't the soles of your shoes thicker than most? Feng Xiao's smile was enigmatic. I know I'm taller than you, he said, because I'm longer. Cui Buchu stared at Feng Xiao. For a few moments he said nothing. Feng Xiao waved his handkerchief, putting on a bashful act. Why is your lord looking at me like that? Your wife is so scared. Her little heart is pitter-pattering away. As he sat silent, Cui Buchu recalled. Back when he'd fallen into Feng Xiao's hands and been poisoned with incense of helplessness, he'd spent day and night in a dazed slumber. The maids must have changed his clothes, and he was sure Feng Xiao had seen him then. This man's face was thicker than the Great Wall. He didn't know the meaning of the word shame. Cui Buchu was beyond numb to it all. He kept his face blank and brushed right past the comment. Tonight, let's make sure Magistrate Gao runs into the ghost again. Are you so sure Xing Mao will make his move? If our surmise is correct, there are 2 factions who wish Duan Qihu dead, Cui Buchu said confidently. One is the 3rd steward and Yushu, and the other was responsible for the poisoned wine. The 3rd steward may share an unknown connection with the poisoner. Xing Mao is also looking for his chance. So, we'll fan the flames and make the threat of this 1,000 weeping ghosts even more explosive. Xing Mao has waited so many years. He's long since grown impatient. He's certain to make his move. Chapter 55. No one could match Cui Buchu when it came to whipping up a storm. From the moment they left the county, rumors raced through Qianmo. Magistrate Gao's residents heard a ghost crying in the middle of the night, said some. Others whispered, a strange case from 20 years ago has resurfaced. Much of the rumor-mongering was the work of spies placed by the Zuoyue and Jiejian bureaus. Humans were naturally drawn to excitement. This kind of ghost story needed hardly any fuel to spread like wildfire. News of the end's haunting the previous night also spread. When Cui Buqiu and Feng Xiao returned, they heard a guest in the hall on the first floor describing the experience in vivid detail to a friend. The well back there, can you see it? The moaning noises were coming from inside. I'm telling you, it was terrifying. I could hear it even with the blankets pulled over my head. It's too sad. Which family's lady met such a tragic end? I don't know, but I looked in the well earlier. I couldn't even see the bottom. Who knows if it's really dry? This inn really is cursed. How long has it been since the last haunting? But the county office is so far from here. How did the ghost get all the way to the magistrate's residence? Doesn't that just prove how terrible the ghost's death was? The victim couldn't get justice, so they became a vengeful spirit growing more ferocious by the day. Magistrate Gao was sent here by the Sui court. He must have the emperor's aura about him. It makes sense for the woman's ghost to plead with him. Do you think Magistrate Gao will take up the case? Forget it. Magistrate Gao hasn't done a damn thing since he arrived. You're not from around here, so you might not know. Recently, 2 vegetable sellers got into a fight and one of them died. He didn't lift a finger then, so why would he do anything now? Going to the king of Shanshan is probably a better idea. At least he'll do something. Cui Buqiu and Feng Xiao, sitting at the next table over, heard this last remark loud and clear. The man was, of course, referring to Xing Mao. Though far from his homeland, he still saw himself as a king. His flatterers addressed him as such to keep him happy. And over time, the informal title had spread. Qianmo didn't belong to anyone. Why shouldn't he set himself up as its king? Feng Xiao and Cui Buqiu had been responsible for the ghost that haunted Gao Yi last night, but they'd had nothing to do with the haunting at the inn. Clearly, Cui Buqiu wasn't the only one trying to stir up trouble. Cui Buqiu didn't fear others causing trouble. He only feared the trouble was too little, that the chaos wasn't enough. Gao Yi draws an imperial stipend, yet he's been slacking on the job. Perhaps we should lend him a hand. Feng Xiao took his meaning at once. You're afraid Xing Mao might move first? That's right. Cui Buqiu smiled faintly. This is a matter of law. If there's an injustice to be redressed, Gao Yi should be the one to conduct the hearing. He stood and crossed the hall to the innkeeper. After a brief conversation, he took out some money and asked him to send someone down the well to search for bones. Over the years, rumors of the ghost in the well had led to a few busybodies trying to head down themselves. The innkeeper, however, was terrified they might really dig up something horrific and he would bear the blame. In any case, since there was no official present to investigate, he wanted as little trouble as possible. He'd asked someone to set a large stove over the well mouth long ago, sealing it shut to stop nosy guests from taking a peek. Yet now Cui Buqiu was here, handing him a hefty sum of money and claiming he'd been sent by Gao Yi. The innkeeper was quickly swayed and called someone to move the stone. Soon enough, the porter tied a rope around his waist and lowered himself down to search. Word spread swiftly through the inn, and a crowd gathered to watch the excitement. With his skills, Feng Xiao could easily have completed the task without any ropes at all, and the search would have gone much faster. But the dry well had been abandoned for years. Even if no water remained, there were still spots of lichen and who knows what kind of crawling creatures. Deputy Chief Feng refused. He sat with his legs crossed, looking down from the inn's second-floor window with Cui Buqiu. Shall we make a bet? On what? Whether they'll find bones in the well? No need to bet. You've already lost. Cui Buqiu coughed twice. Cities on the border were all wind and sand, and the climate was dry. When Qiao Xian wasn't there to take care of him every step of the way, he paid little attention to his own body. After 2 days in the city, his cough had worsened again, and his throat was hoarse and dry. "Why's that?" asked Feng Xiao. Cui Buchu's face was blank. "Because after we arrived and heard those rumors from Changchang, I had someone throw a corpse down there. They'll definitely find it." Whether the bones were old or new, the common folk wouldn't care. As long as there were bones in the well, the hauntings must be real, and this ancient case must truly conceal an enormous injustice. The victim had been unable to rest in peace and transformed into a ghost to seek vengeance and plead for their wrongdoings to be redressed. The story would spread further, the uproar grow and grow. Gao Yi had been tossed a hot potato. He couldn't stay out of the matter. Duan Zihu, once rumors of the haunting in his estate spread as well, would also end up on the rack. If the original state of Qianmo had been a pot of warm water, Cui Buchu's arrival had tossed a bunch of firewood under the stove and lit a match. Now the water was at a violent boil. Anyone could be a cunning fox. What was rare was the ability to see 3 steps ahead of the other foxes. Even Feng Xiao had to concede to Cui Buchu when it came to scheming. Was there anything Cui Buchu couldn't predict? Feng Xiao wanted to ask, but refrained. Instead, he laughed. Cui Buchu was baffled. "What are you laughing about?" "Nothing," said Feng Xiao. If something so unpredictable did exist, something Cui Buchu believed to be within his grasp, yet defied his predictions, wouldn't that be terribly interesting? While the curious ran to the inn to watch the show, Duan Zihu was at home sneering over the letter from Cui Buchu. Or rather, a letter that had been sent on Cui Buchu's instructions, yet was in Gao Yi's name and stamped with Gao Yi's seal. Gao Yi refused to step forward, but Cui Buchu had at least browbeaten him into writing a letter. The contents mentioned an old case from 20 years ago and invited Duan Zihu to visit and provide an explanation. There were no files, no statements from victims laying out their grievances. It was all just unfounded speculation. Certain local rumors were circulating. Some said that, in Duan Zihu's youth, a young woman had hung herself after he'd betrayed her hopes. Others spoke of a blood debt he owed from his bandit days and warned the debtor had come to claim his life. Duan Zihu didn't sleep the entire night. Last night, a voice was heard wailing at the inn, and Gao Yi had seen a ghost. Duan Zihu's own haunting had left him ill at ease. Though the ghost hadn't appeared again in the latter half of the night, he'd still felt as if it was speaking beside his ear. Duan Zihu was a martial artist, a strong and healthy man. A sleepless night was nothing to him. But right now his mood was horrible, which could mean only one thing. Duan Zihu had a guilty conscience. "Will your lordship go see Gao Yi?" asked his steward. He'd overseen the Duan residence since its construction and was one of Duan Zihu's closest confidants. "Of course I won't," sneered Duan Zihu. "Gao Yi is a nobody. People call him magistrate because great sway stands behind him, not because he's worthy of the title on his own." Steward Lin nodded. He was staunchly loyal to Duan Zihu and never asked unnecessary questions. But he still had his responsibilities, so he ventured. "Shall we reply to the letter or ignore it completely?" "Send someone to tell him I'm bedridden with illness," said Duan Zihu. "Tell him I'll visit another day." He paused before asking, "Did you hear or see anything last night?" "This lowly one saw nothing," said the steward, "but I did hear the sound of weeping. Whoever made it must have been a top-notch martial arts master because this lowly one couldn't catch them." Duan Zihu snorted. Where did Xing Mao manage to find such a skilled expert? But as he spoke, he realized something was off. Even if Xing Mao had found someone to impersonate a ghost, how could they know about an event that had happened 20 years ago? He thought of the deaths of the third steward, Changchang, Li Fei, and the others, and felt the muscles in his face tense. "I heard Gao Yi and the Yangji Inn also heard a ghost last night," said Steward Lin. "There aren't that many ghosts in the world," Duan Zihu scoffed. "This must be one of Xing Mao's schemes." At Stuart Lean's look of confusion, he continued, "He's wanted to move against me for a long time, but never had the chance. His plot to poison me at the banquet failed, but he's sure to come up with another. He'll take advantage of the hauntings to stir up the imagination of the city, then send an assassin after me under the guise of a vengeful ghost and pretend he had nothing to do with it." As master and servant were talking, a report arrived. A corpse had been found in the dry well behind the Yangji Inn. The victim had been dead for a long time. Skin and flesh had crumbled to dust, leaving only stark white bones. Everyone in the surrounding neighborhoods had gone to watch the hubbub. Apparently, the nephew of the king of Kucha, a guest at the inn, had requested the remains be delivered to the county office so Gao Yi might preside over the case. Stuart Lean frowned. "How should we handle this, my lord? Perhaps this lowly one should go make some inquiries with Gao Yi?" He could tell Duan Qihu was shaken. Something must have really happened 20 years ago that he didn't want to talk about. It wouldn't do for the steward to question him further. He could only help his master resolve the issue before them as best he could. "No need." Duan Qihu spoke through gritted teeth. "Gao Yi is a coward, but Xing Mao would undoubtedly seize this chance to act. I've yet to repay him for the last time, so why not pay it all in one go? Since he can no longer wait, we'll land the strike first. Wait until after midnight, then take our men to the Xing residence. You must fell Xing Mao in one blow." Stuart Lean was stunned. Shouldn't we take more time to plan?" Duan Qihu buzzed with anxiety. He was overcome by an unfamiliar sense of powerlessness, the feeling of knowing precisely where the enemy was, yet being unable to leap over and strike them dead. "It's too late. Xing Mao has wanted sole dominion over Tianmo for a long time, and the first step is getting rid of me. But we are not unprepared. There are the 50 elite guards I've had you train the past few years. Though none are exceptional, they're still first-class fighters. If we can catch Xing Mao flat-footed, even with the help of that fake ghost of his, he won't be a match for us." Years of soft living had gradually worn away Duan Qihu's ambition and arrogance, but as he spoke now, he regained his confidence. "Once Xing Mao is dead, who in Tianmo can oppose me?" It was thanks to his bold decisiveness that he'd climbed to his current position. Now, once again, Duan Qihu firmly believed he'd judged the situation correctly. Stuart Lean had no further objections, but was still concerned for Duan Qihu's safety. "If I take all 50 men, who will protect your lordship?" "Leave Bing and Ding behind. The rest will go with you." Duan Qihu's smile was cold. "There's no way Xing Mao can respond that fast. If anyone comes here, whether human or a ghost, I'll make sure to show them a good time. I'm truly curious as to who could emerge unscathed against my Vajra finger technique." In the Xing residence, Xing Mao's expression was like a fresh spring breeze, evidence of his good mood. "Duan Qihu is powerful, but he's grown old. A toothless tiger is nothing to fear." He looked at the man before him, and his expression grew even fonder. "Besides, everyone has turned their backs on him. Even you've betrayed him. Is he still worthy of calling himself my rival?" "It's just as Duke Xing says." The man cupped his hands respectfully. "In the past, Lord Meng Chang had an entourage of 3,000. He treated all of them as family and showed great respect for the wise. Now I shall show you the same treatment. Duan Qihu believes himself above everyone. No one is worth his attention. Even an old man like yourself, who's followed him for many years, must refer to yourself as lowly before him. How can a man like him be my equal in the city of Tianmo?" Xing Mao stood and walked over, personally pulling the man to his feet. "Lin Xianxiang need not be so polite in front of me." "I'm only too grateful for Duke Xing's regard," said the man. "But the 50 elite guards under Duan Qihu are all loyal to him and don't fear death. The group includes 2 of his most trusted subordinates, and I fear I have no authority over them." Xing Mao showed him a small smile. "No matter. He sent away all his best men, and the Duan residence has become an empty fortress. This is our chance to take it all in one fell swoop." Another voice spoke. "After tonight, Qianmo will have to change its name to Xing. The pronouncement came from the white-clad monk sitting below Xingmao. He was respectful as he offered his congratulations, but his attitude was neither arrogant nor sycophantic, with no hint of flattery. Xingmao burst into laughter. Then I shall thank Yu Xianxiang in advance for his fortuitous words. All right, you guys, that is all we've got for today. So since I, read really, really short chapters, I don't really have a lot to say then. Of course, I think Cui Buchu is just like a genius, in his schemes and everything. And it's just so nice to see that Feng Xiao truly admires that. And that quickly, I almost forgot that, Cui Buchu said, we're going to pretend to be ghosts, or Feng Xiao. So I'm curious to see, though, who this other ghost is, because they had to do with Duan Qihu's ghost haunting, but not the haunting at the inn. So now that we see that Yu Xianxiang at the end of this chapter, at the end of chapter 55, I'm going to assume that he set that up. Maybe he's not doing the haunting himself, or maybe he is, or found someone to do it at the end. So we shall see. This is quite interesting. I also thought it was funny that Cui Buchu, when he was talking to Gao Yi, specifically used the word calamitous, because when we were at the banquet, when they were at the banquet, we weren't there, right? Or I guess we were. One of the things that Gao Yi had mentioned about his fortune or whatever was that it was calamitous. So it was just nice to see that word being used as the form of manipulation to, get him to at least acquiesce, even if he didn't want to do anything, but acquiesce to whatever Cui Buchu had planned. So I look forward to reading more to you guys. We shall see what tomorrow consists of. It might only be 2 chapters again. I'll just see how I feel later today. If I can read a little bit more, or if not, and just have to wait until the morning again, then it'll definitely be short. But thank you all for working with me. And yeah, 我爱你们.